Parshas Shemos. Exodus. New book, new parsha, new story, new narrative. The parsha introduces the beginning of the enslavement of the children of Israel. The introduction is really in 3 verses. It's in Perek Aleph, Pasuk Ches, that's chapter 1, verses 8, begins with verse 8, and then continues with 9 and 10. Ches Tesenba. The Torah says as follows, Vayakam melech chadash al Mitzrayim asher lo yada es Yosef. A new king arose over Egypt who did not know Joseph. And Rashi cites the dispute in the Talmud and elsewhere about whether this is actually a new king, meaning the old one either died or was deposed, and a new king arose, or that it was the same Paro who had benefited from the services of Yosef, but he chose to ignore the good that that Yosef had done, and that the ancestors of the then the children of Israel in the land of Goshen. In any event, the verse continues. It says, "Vayomer el amo," and he said to his people, "Hinei am bnei Yisrael ravod sumimenu." This nation, this people of the children of Israel, are mightier and greater than we are, greater in number and greater in strength. Let us deal wisely with them, pen yirbeh, lest they become even greater. And it will be, if there is a war, they will join our enemies, and they will fight us, and they will leave the land. Some people point out that this is kind of a classic anti-Semitism at work. It's like, do you want the Jews in the land, or do you want them to leave your land? It seems that either way, frequently, not always, but frequently, the Jews are reviled, and as a result, resented, and sometimes they're kicked out, sometimes they are accused of having their own agenda and being disloyal, etc. We see the beginnings of that here. Rabbi Yaakov Kaminetsky says something which goes against the tide. And he says, on its face, Paro's concern is legitimate. What does he mean? Well, it doesn't say so explicitly in the Torah, but in the written Torah, but in the Torah Shebaal Peh, in the oral law, we learn that the children of Israel, who we, in today's parlance, call the Jews, were exempt from paying taxes, and they were exempt from the shibud, from the enslavement. What had happened during the years of famine is that Yosef had sold food to the Egyptians for whatever possessions they had, originally money, then other possessions, then ultimately they gave up their land and even their freedom to Paro. And they all became slaves of Paro, and they all were subject to taxes imposed by Paro, except for the children of Israel. Why was that? Well, that was a historical decision that was made in recognition of the contribution of that people to the welfare of Egypt. Egypt had become the wealthiest nation on earth at the time. So this one group was exempt because they and their ancestors were the engineers of the prosperity of Egypt. And as a result, they were resented. One might say, for good reason, suggests Rabbi Yaakov. So what's wrong with that? So there is a fundamental principle in Judaism and in universal morality, which is that of recognizing the good and having gratitude to people who do you well. They do good things for you. So you have gratitude. Egypt had gratitude to the people of Israel. They were the children of Israel. Israel was the name of Yaakov, of Jacob. It was his other name. Bnei Yisrael, the children of Israel, were literally the descendants. They are today as well. But then it was a generation or two removed from Israel. So the children of Israel represented the family that made Egypt secure, that made Egypt wealthy, that put Egypt at the top of all of the countries of that time. And so, says Rabbi Yaakov Kaminetsky, that Paro was missing this element of Hakar Satov, of recognizing the good that this people had brought to the country and honoring them for it and exempting them from the same treatment that everyone else got. Now it says that he said, Havanis Chakmalo, that let us deal wisely. Let us. Who is the us? So again, according to the rabbis, the oral tradition, we know that there were three advisors in the court of Paro. There was Bilam, Eov, sometimes in English referred to as Job, and Yisro, Jethro. And the rabbis say that the three advisors had three different approaches towards this issue. Bilam was of the opinion, enslave them. Tax them. Treat them poorly. What have they done for us lately? Eov, on the other hand, was silent. He perhaps could see both sides of the story, both sides of the argument, didn't want to commit, or he didn't want to cross the power that is Paro, and so he kept his mouth closed and uttered no opinion. Yisro, on the other hand, was a person dedicated to Hakaras Hatov. He was dedicated to the concept of gratitude. And so he booked, he fled. He wanted nothing to do with the enslavement of the Jews. Now this is consistent, we see this as consistent with his personality a little bit later. In Perek Beis, that's chapter 2, starting around verse 16, Tezayin, and later verses, the Torah describes how Moshe was in Midian, Vayeshev Eretz Midian, and he was at the well. And it says, the Kohen Midian Sheva Banos, the Kohen, the priest of Midian, who we understand to be Yisro, had 7 daughters, and they came to the well to draw the water and to water the sheep. And it says that they were prevented from doing so by other shepherds, by Gorshum. So Vayakam Moshe, so Moshe couldn't tolerate this, and he didn't know them, but he saw injustice, and he couldn't tolerate it. Vayoshian Vayashkas Sonam. So he saved them, and he gave their sheep, their flocks, water. So they came back to their father, and he says, why are you back so quickly? So they said, Ish Mitzri Hitzilanu Miyad Haroim. There was an Egyptian man. They considered Moshe to be Egyptian. They said, he saved us from the shepherds, and he also watered our flock. And he said, what was Yisro's response? He didn't say, oh, that's nice, sit down and eat. Instead, he said, Lama zez abtenes ish. Why did you leave him there? Keren lo v'yochal lechem. Call him and let him eat with us. So we see that there is something that animates Yisro, and this thing that animates Yisro is the sense of Hakaras Hatov. And it's in direct conflict with the lack of Hakaras Hatov that Paro had. It says, Vayakam melech chodash asher lo yadas Yosef, and we mentioned that it might have been a new king who simply did not have the legacy, wasn't moved by the legacy of Joseph. And certainly if you say that it was the same king as interacted with Yosef, but now he conveniently forgot him, he displayed an astounding lack of Hakaras Hatov, of gratitude. And we understand that Hakaras Hatov, we mentioned this in the past, doesn't literally mean gratitude. It means a discernment of good. And this is a quality that we see the great people of our nation and of other nations, such as Yisro, who was not a descendant of Israel. He was not what we would call today Jewish. He was not a child of Israel, but yet he had this sense of Hakaras Hatov, which we clearly see that the rabbis consider to be a universal moral principle, which is to recognize the good and not just to express gratitude for it, but to act on that gratitude, which is call him over. Let's give him something to eat. And then later we see when, after the Exodus, we see that Moshe sits down with Yisro and describes to him what happened. In Yisro, it says, Vayichad Yisro. He got very excited over the news about how God had delivered his people from the hand of the oppressor. This lesson in the very beginning of Shemos is that the principle, the universal moral principle of gratitude is so profound that it can lead to events that literally change the course of history. Thank you. Have a good Shabbos.